Hello, this is the second module of Ohio EPA's public outreach for the Maumee Watershed Nutrient Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL project. I'm Tiffany Kavalak, the Division of Surface Water Chief at Ohio EPA. A TMDL is, in essence, a restoration roadmap. This is explained in our first module, where we outlined Ohio's TMDL process. We also explained how this project is our first TMDL that addresses what we call far-field impairments. Far-field here means nutrient reductions throughout the Maumee watershed to address impairments to drinking water and recreational uses downstream in the Western Lake Erie Basin. Today, I am going to review the technical material that, taken together, represents a great deal of work already developed for the Maumee River watershed. As discussed in Module 1, Ohio follows 5 major steps in the development of a TMDL project. Per the TMDL rules that went into effect in 2019, public input now occurs at each of these steps. Near-field TMDLs that Ohio has developed, ones that address pollutants directly impacting the local streams or lakes, generally start with a single study plan. Those study plans are developed by Ohio EPA and determine where fish and bug assessments and other water quality data will be collected. This Maumee River watershed far-field TMDL is much more complicated because the area where the nutrients are coming from spans thousands of acres, originate from numerous sources, and there are dozens of federal, state, local, and academia partners working to assess and research the problem. All this work by the various partners have been documented in numerous reports and represent the first step of this TMDL, which is the study plan. The following slides will outline how this work satisfies the study plan step of our TMDL process. We'll start with a list of work that Ohio EPA and multiple partners have been involved with over the last decade. All these work groups and resulting documents are testament to the fact that nutrient reduction has been on our radar for a long time. Since this TMDL builds on initial work, they are included in this TMDL's Step 1 study plan documents. These work groups began in 2007 when Ohio EPA, in consultation with Heidelberg, convened the Ohio Lake Erie Phosphorus Task Force to review and evaluate the increasing dissolved reactive phosphorus, or DRP, loading trends, and a potential connection to deteriorating conditions in Lake Erie. This work group was made up of numerous stakeholders, including the Farm Bureau, university partners, Ohio Department of Agriculture, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Geological Survey, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and other interested parties. A final report of the task force was completed in 2010. In 2012, the Phosphorus Task Force was reconvened a second time with the purpose of developing recommendations for reduction targets for total phosphorus and DRP, as well as policy and management recommendations based upon new and emerging data. A final report of the Phase 2 task force was completed in 2013. Around the same time as the first Lake Erie Phosphorus Task Force wrapped up, Ohio started drafting a statewide framework for nutrient reduction strategies. Ohio EPA developed the framework with Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the Ohio Department of Agriculture. This draft framework then became Ohio's nutrient reduction strategy, a statewide nutrient reduction plan that is updated on a regular basis. 2 work groups, the State of Ohio Directors Agricultural Nutrient and Water Quality Working Group and the Point Source and Urban Runoff Nutrient Work Group, provided recommendations for the state nutrient reduction strategy. The recommendation for the Ohio Nutrient Mass Balance Study came out of this effort. One of the main Step 1 study plan documents is the recommended phosphorus loading targets for Lake Erie, dated May 11, 2015, which is applicable to the Maumee watershed's spring, March through July, loading period. This document was developed by a task team for the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement's Nutrients Annex, or Annex 4. It was a product of U.S. and Canadian experts and outlines that the size of the Western Lake Erie hab bloom is primarily driven by the amount or load of phosphorus delivered by the Maumee watershed. The recommended total phosphorus spring season load target from this document, which is 860 metric tons, or about 1.9 million pounds at Waterville, 9 out of 10 years, will be the basis for the Maumee Watershed Nutrient, TMDL's phosphorus load targets. This is a good place to mention the overlap and differences between this TMDL project and the Annex 4 targets. Both address the HABs that develop seasonally in Western Lake Erie. While the TMDL project addresses Annex 4 phosphorus targets for the Maumee, there are other targets outlined by Annex 4 for other tributaries. Those other targeted tributaries are intended to address HABs in Lake Erie estuaries and the hypoxia in the lake's central basin. The TMDL project addresses 303D Clean Water Act impairments that Ohio EPA has listed, which is outside of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement sphere. The TMDL will also go further than the Annex 4 load targets in that it will allocate or define specific amounts of phosphorus allowed from various sources, such as point sources, non-point sources, home sewage treatment systems, stormwater, and so on. As noted 2 slides ago, the Annex 4 load target to address Western Lake Erie HABs for total phosphorus will be used as the target for this TMDL. The Annex 4 document also includes a dissolved reactive phosphorus, or DRP, load target to address HABs. DRP is a subset of total phosphorus. DRP is part of the total that is most available for algae to use because it is not bound to solids. The photo on this slide illustrates this concept. Because accounting for total phosphorus loads is easier to track and more scientifically straightforward than DRP, only total phosphorus will be used in this TMDL. Efforts to reduce total phosphorus generally reduce DRP. Ohio is coordinating with researchers to identify and fine-tune best management practices in order to maximize DRP reductions. These efforts will be discussed more in Module 3. TMDLs are living documents, therefore this project can be reopened to address DRP once research and science has evolved. Also considered part of the Step 1 study plan documents are the near-field assessments and TMDLs developed or being developed within the Maumee watershed, described in Module 1. These historic and ongoing assessments and TMDLs provide crucial information about how the local environment is functioning. Near-field TMDLs also inform us about whether nutrient enrichment causes any local impairments. Phosphorus reduction efforts to address near-field TMDLs also reduce nutrients delivered to the lake. Implementation plans and projects to address these near-field impacts will continue to be prioritized concurrently with the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL. All TMDLs and support documents are available on our website at this link as well. Another document described in Module 1 was the report that US EPA commissioned, which examined if implementation of near-field TMDLs alone could meet nutrient reduction targets. This document concluded that there were too few near-field nutrient impairments with TMDLs to reach our goals. Therefore, this document is the rationale for establishing far-field phosphorus load targets for the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL, and also included in our Step 1 study plan list. There are 28 nutrient gauges throughout the Maumee watershed, and Ohio EPA will be utilizing data from these gauges in measuring loading reductions. This map shows where nutrient monitoring occurs at tributaries throughout the Maumee River watershed. All these nutrient monitoring stations are at USGS stream flow gauges. The water quality is monitored using refrigerated autosamplers by either Heidelberg's National Center for Water Quality Research or by USGS. The highlight on this map points to the Waterville monitoring location that Heidelberg has been monitoring for over 30 years. That is the key location for Annex 4 phosphorus load targets of 860 metric tons. These monitoring gauges can be broken out into 3 groups. The first group includes 10 monitoring gauges near the outlet of major tributaries, which are depicted in green. We call these stations pour points. This allows us to understand the regional precipitation patterns and land use differences of the Maumee watershed. In the second group, 6 gauges monitor the loads being exported into or out of Ohio. This accounts for about 26% of the Maumee River watershed's land area that is in Michigan or Indiana. Information from these gauges will allow us to understand and track nutrients being exported out of and imported into Ohio. Finally, the third group includes 9 gauges that monitor smaller tributaries which drain 50 square miles or less. These sentinel watersheds will respond faster in showing nutrient reduction implementation practices. These stations monitor a variety of unique features. For example, Little Flat Rock's watershed has poorly drained soils with dense row cropping. Surface drains are predominantly used instead of field tiles here. Platter Creek's watershed has a dense population of livestock operations. Therefore, a much greater proportion of manure is used as fertilizer. Another example, Wolf Creek, drains a predominantly suburban watershed. The data collected by both USGS and Heidelberg's National Center for Water Quality Research are approved by Ohio EPA as Level 3 credible data, which means it can be used in Ohio's regulatory decision-making. These plans, referred to as QAPs, or Quality Assurance Protection Plans, and the wealth of historic data are included in our TMDL study plan Step 1. These gauges are currently being used to monitor Ohio's nutrient mass balance study, Annex 4's nutrient reduction goals, as well as development of the nutrient loading allocations for this TMDL. The next 2 documents that fit into this study plan Step 1 are Ohio's nutrient mass balance reports and the 2020 Domestic Action Plan. The following few slides outline some important material from these documents relevant to this TMDL. Every 2 years, Ohio EPA is required to publish a report on the sources of nutrients throughout the major watersheds in Ohio, and the 3rd iteration of the Nutrient Mass Balance Study of Ohio's major rivers was published in late 2020. As previously discussed, nutrient data collected by USGS and Heidelberg at major rivers are analyzed. This map shows the areas included in the 2020 Nutrient Mass Balance Report, and the gauges are represented by the red dots. The red dotted line depicts the watershed divide between the Lake Erie Basin and the Ohio River Basin. And the latest edition included about 66% of Ohio's land area and 11 major watersheds. Additional nutrient tracking gauges will be coming online for the 2022 report. This slide shows some of the results from the 2020 Nutrient Mass Balance, where the report's main objective is to determine the major sources of nutrients. Here, each stacked bar shows the 5-year average annual total phosphorus load, or amount by weight, for each monitored watershed. The colors within each bar show the proportion of load from different sources. The dark red is non-point source, turquoise is the industrial and sanitary NPDES permitted wastewater treatment plants, and dark green shows the home sewage or household septic treatment systems, or HSTS, sources. The Maumee watershed is the 2nd largest watershed by area on this chart, but produces the greatest amount of total phosphorus, including the loads from Indiana and Michigan. A quick note about nitrogen. Total nitrogen is included in the Nutrient Mass Balance Report, and the Maumee River watershed also discharges the greatest amount of this nutrient. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement's Annex 4 does not have reduction targets for total nitrogen to address Lake Erie's HABs. However, it is known that the nitrogen component of nutrient runoff does play a role in HAB development, most likely in the level of toxicity of the HABs more so than the size of the bloom. We will continue to work with Annex 4 and the scientific community to stay apprised of what nitrogen goals should be established. Phosphorus is generally considered the most economically feasible nutrient to reduce in order to limit excessive algae growth. So for now, the TMDL will be solely focused on phosphorus, but as discussed before, TMDLs are dynamic documents. This figure from the Nutrient Mass Balance Report shows land use breakdowns for the watersheds studied. The brown in each column represents agricultural land use. As you can see, agriculture is the predominant land use in the Maumee, as well as in other Western Lake Erie tributaries. Note the difference in the Cuyahoga column. There, the green natural areas and pink urban development are the major land uses and have the lowest agricultural land use among these examples. This last slide from the Nutrient Mass Balance Report summarizes the 5-year annual average total phosphorus by sources as a pie chart for the entire Maumee watershed. As you can see, dark green, home sewage or household septic treatment systems, or HSTS, sources equate to about 3% of these loads. MPDES, or permitted sources, including combined sewer overflows, shown in turquoise, equate to about 7%. The remaining 90%, depicted in red, has been identified as non-point source loads. As discussed earlier, we know the land use of the Maumee watershed by area is primarily agricultural, and that is why this Maumee Nutrient TMDL will be focusing most of its attention towards agricultural contributions. Next, we'll take a closer look at Ohio's 2020 Domestic Action Plan, often referred to as Ohio's DAP. Ohio's DAP effort is led by the Ohio Lake Erie Commission. Its main objective is to explain how Ohio will meet the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement's Annex 4 nutrient reduction targets. The DAP is a living document following an adaptive management process. It coordinates planning and actions by all relevant Ohio state agencies. A key element of the DAP is to provide support to nutrient non-point source reduction planning. In the Ohio 2020 DAP, Ohio EPA built upon the methods used for the nutrient mass balance work in the Maumee watershed. Baseline phosphorus loads were determined for the Maumee subwatershed management units called HUC-12s. Ohio has 186 HUC-12 subwatersheds in the Maumee watershed. The results of that analysis are shown on this figure. Here, the baseline spring loading season total phosphorus load from each HUC-12 is shown as a yield in the units of pounds per acre. From this baseline, a 40% reduction was applied to each HUC-12. This results in a loading target for each HUC-12. These targets are included in the 2020 DAP. The targets are intended to be used in non-point source implementation plans, also known as 9-element plans. We'll discuss more about these plans in the third module of these initial TMDL outreach presentations. Here's another slide showing some of the results from the DAP. The pie chart on the left divides out the Maumee watershed baseline load from Ohio and the other states. The yellow 25% was calculated as the total phosphorus load combined from Indiana and Michigan. The remaining 75% is from Ohio. Concluding our discussion of Ohio's DAP, we'll have a look again at our diagram of this TMDL and the Annex 4 targets. This time, we'll show how Ohio's Domestic Action Plan fits into these projects. All 3 projects address HABs in Western Lake Erie and the Maumee River phosphorus targets that cause those blooms. The TMDL will allocate all sources of phosphorus. This includes non-point sources as well as point sources. Because it will include these allocations, the TMDL addresses Clean Water Act requirements. As we explained on the last few slides, the DAP includes Maumee far-field targets, but these will differ from the TMDL allocations in that they are focused on non-point sources only. Those targets are intended to be included in 9-element plans. The TMDL will also provide implementation recommendations for nutrient reductions. So both the TMDL and the DAP support plans and implementation projects to reduce nutrients throughout the Maumee. We'll explain more about this work in Module 3. The Annex 4 targets and the DAP also include targets outside of the Maumee watershed to address HABs in some of Ohio's Lake Erie estuaries and Central Basin Lake Erie hypoxia objectives. Since those are outside of the Maumee and don't impact the Western Basin Lake Erie HABs, these targets are not included in this TMDL. Finally, the Annex 4 targets include objectives that address areas of Lake Erie not within Ohio's borders, specifically in Lake Erie's eastern basin, in Pennsylvania, New York, and Ontario, and other Great Lakes. Obviously, these are not included in Ohio's DAP or this TMDL. Ohio's harmful algal bloom drinking water monitoring rules are the final key document of this TMDL study plan, Step 1. These rules went through rigorous public outreach that started in June of 2015. They became effective on June 1st, 2016. These rules are applicable to public water systems with surface water influenced intakes and include monitoring and reporting requirements for microcystins and screening requirements for cyanobacteria. With these monitoring requirements in place, public water systems and Ohio EPA collect data that is used to assess if the public drinking water supply beneficial use is being met. Data used in public water system assessments for Ohio's integrated report will be discussed further in Step 2 of this presentation. This concludes an overview of the key documents we have identified as study plan components for this TMDL. Our Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL website has the complete list of these documents with links to the full reports. At the end of this module, we will be asking for stakeholder input regarding the completeness of this list. As outlined earlier, Step 2 in Ohio's TMDL process for near-field TMDLs involves the publishing of a biological and water quality report. Since this project is considering the far-field impacts, the Step 2 documentation is more involved and will be referred to holistically as water quality results documents. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, along with US EPA, have developed a cyanobacteria index, allowing them to interpret satellite data of Lake Erie and determine the extent of HABs. These data are used to inform the frequent NOAA Lake Erie Bulletin that is published throughout the Lake Erie HAB bloom season. These Level 3 credible data results are utilized by Ohio in our evaluation and impairment listing of the lake and included in Step 2. A peer-reviewed scientific article by several Ohio academics and NOAA was published in the Harmful Algae Journal and is the basis for Ohio's Western Lake Erie Recreation Use Impairment designation. The metric for impairment utilizes NOAA's satellite data and evaluates the magnitude or extent of HABs over various time windows. This document is also part of the TMDL's second step. Regularly updated HAB information regarding public water systems is also provided by the state of Ohio. These data are used in determining the public drinking water impairment status of Lake Erie, and this material is considered part of the water quality results documents for Step 2 of the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL. Every other year, Ohio publishes an integrated report meeting the sections 303D and 305B Clean Water Act requirements. Part of the integrated report lists where beneficial uses do not meet expectations. The rows of this table show the beneficial uses that are assessed for Lake Erie. The beneficial uses are aquatic life use, public drinking water supply, human health for sport fish consumption, and recreation. The recreation use is assessed for impairments from both pathogens as measured by indicator E. coli bacteria and from harmful algae blooms. The columns show the areas or assessment units that are considered. There are 7 Lake Erie assessment units. They are the Western Lake Erie shoreline and its open waters, the island shoreline, Sandusky shoreline and its open waters, and the central shoreline and its open waters. For more detail on these assessment units, please review Module 1. A check mark on this table means that the use is impaired for that area. These first highlighted check marks indicate that this TMDL will address the public drinking water impairments of the Western Lake Erie open waters, Western shoreline, and island shoreline assessment units. The highlighted check marks on the bottom indicates that the recreation impairment due to HABs for those same 3 assessment units will also be addressed by this TMDL. The methods used to make this determination and the impairment designations for these areas have been included in Ohio's 2018 and 2020 integrated reports and are also included as water quality reports for Step 2 of this TMDL. A webinar explaining the details of these impairment listings is available on Ohio EPA's YouTube channel labeled 2018 Ohio Integrated Water Quality Monitoring and Assessment Report. We have now discussed the multiple documents that study Lake Erie's Western Basin and the Maumee watershed's water quality and incorporated them into the study plan documents for Step 1. We have also outlined the documents that compile the water quality results and determine impairment as part of Step 2. With this comprehensive compilation of material for Steps 1 and 2 documented, we are now moving into Step 3, which is the Loading Analysis Plan, or LAP, in Ohio's TMDL process. But before we move forward in publishing the Loading Analysis Plan, we are inviting stakeholders to review this TMDL's project webpage, which houses links to all the material outlined in this module. Once you review the material in more detail, please use the email link above, which is also available on our website, to let us know if we are missing any important material that will guide the agency in finalizing the LAP. Stakeholder input will be open for 30 days following the debut of this module and will close on July 9th, 2021. Once stakeholder input on Steps 1 and 2 are reviewed, we will publish the Loading Analysis Plan, or LAP, which will show the link between impairment and restoration. It provides a roadmap by listing actions that will be taken to address impairments. The Maumee Watershed TMDL LAP will explain that a total phosphorus TMDL is being developed and will contain the proposed modeling approach and water quality restoration targets. Ohio EPA has committed to develop the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL within 2 to 3 years from the time we published the 2020 integrated report. The expected release dates for the 3 final steps of this TMDL process are shown on this slide. These are ambitious goals, but we will make every effort to stay focused. There will be a public comment period for each of the next 3 steps: the LAP, 30 days, the preliminary modeling results, 30 days, and the draft TMDL, 60 days. And the final step in the process will be to submit it to US EPA for approval. As you can see from this module, a great deal of work has already taken place in monitoring and assessing the harmful algae blooms in Western Lake Erie. The data collected from the work so far lends us to be able to move to Step 3 in our TMDL process, the Loading Analysis Plan. All this monitoring, assessment, and impairment metric evaluation and development was necessary before Ohio could commit to doing a TMDL. We needed to build metrics for declaring recreation and drinking water algae impairments through NOAA satellite data with specific size and duration, drinking water rules, etc. And those metrics were vetted and public noticed through our 2018 and 2020 integrated water quality reports. Once the metrics were complete, Ohio had to consider another US EPA TMDL requirement regarding reasonable assurances. EPA evaluates whether a TMDL provides reasonable assurance that non-point source controls will achieve expected load reductions and that there is adequate funding to accomplish this. With Governor DeWine's water quality improvement commitment through H2 Ohio, we have now secured that missing piece of the TMDL project. To summarize the main points covered in this module, Ohio's TMDL process involves 5 steps. Each step documents a different aspect of the project, from impairments to implementation. Several reports make up Step 1 or study plan of this Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL. These define the conditions of the Western Lake Erie's HABs, explain that the Maumee Watershed's nutrients are responsible for the size and toxicity of each year's blooms, and provide total phosphorus nutrient reduction targets to address these HABs. Ohio's last 2 integrated water quality reports from 2018 and 2020 are included in Step 2 and document Western Lake Erie's recreation and drinking water impairments due to HABs. Ohio EPA is asking stakeholders to provide any additional documentation or reports they would like us to consider for Steps 1 and 2 of this project no later than July 9th, 2021. Once stakeholder input is reviewed, this project will officially be in Step 3, where a loading analysis plan is being drafted and expected to be released for this TMDL in late July 2021. Thank you for viewing Module 2 for the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL project. We encourage everyone to view Module 3 of this outreach series, which should be released early to midsummer 2021. That module will document existing nutrient reduction efforts in the entire Maumee watershed, including Indiana and Michigan contributions, and will highlight ongoing implementation projects ongoing concurrently with the development of this TMDL.